Hello, my name is Rory McEvoy and we're here in the Horological Conservation Studio at the Royal Observatory, Greenwich. This is where we do all of the conservation on our collection of clocks and watches. And it's a particularly exciting opportunity as today we have Larcum Kendall's first timekeeper, better known perhaps as K1, in pieces on the bench today. So I'll be giving you a little run through the history of this incredibly important timekeeper, as well as looking at the technical aspects. And it is indeed a very rare opportunity to see inside and just view the individual components, because this watch has not been in pieces for 33 years, last taken apart in 1984. Well, John Harrison proved that a watch could be made to take to sea and navigate by. But the Board of Longitude, who are entrusted with the responsibility of rewarding successful methods for determining longitude at sea, wanted to be reassured that John Harrison's watch was not successful by chance, but that watch could be replicated and the replicas would perform equally well. So Larcum Kendall is commissioned to make this copy. And it's interesting actually when you look at the earlier history, when John Harrison has this eureka moment to make a watch, and he employs John Jeffries, the watchmaker. Now Larcum Kendall was apprenticed to John Jeffries, so we're from the same stable, if you like, of watchmaking. So Kendall was no doubt present when Jeffries was working on the first prototype watch that Harrison then went on to develop by adding a remontoire and producing H4. So the watch by Kendall is signed 1769 and was first issued to Captain Cook on his second voyage of discovery. So the watch was at sea for a total of 3 years, and during which time it performed impeccably. So much so that Cook referred to it as a trusty friend. And more importantly, it really provided the seal of approval that was required for the gentlemen of the Board of Longitude and the wider world, that a watch really could be made and relied upon during the difficult conditions on a long sea voyage to navigate by. So Larcum Kendall's watch is almost visually identical to the watch produced by John Harrison earlier on. The only subtle differences are the way that the enamel dial plate is affixed to the movement, and with Kendall's watch there are two small screws just visible, floral engraving detailing daffodils. It just is magnificent and quite breathtaking. And the decorative components on pocket watches of the era, it means nothing to the performance of the watch. This is all embellishment and a matter of pride for the watchmaker. So at this point it's worth pointing out what differentiates Kendall's watch from a contemporary pocket watch made in London of the time. So it is a fusee mechanism. It requires oil. Most of the pivots run in jewel bearings. They're very luxurious. They have ruby jewel holes. They have diamond end stones, so it's all enclosed and very protected from the environment. So the oil has a better chance of staying fluid and staying in the right place for longer, which is very important when you're at sea in Cook's example, for 3 years at a stretch. Importantly though, the watch is fitted with a device that you will not find in a contemporary pocket watch, and this is known as a remontoire. Now the remontoire periodically rewinds a small spring higher up in the train of the watch. This remontoire is fired every 7.5 seconds in Kendall's K1. And this helps deliver a smooth, equal power to the escapement, which of course gives the watch greater stability in timekeeping. It's worth saying a little bit about the more recent history of the watch and what has led to it coming into the horological studio for conservation treatment. Most recently, the watch has been on a bit of a world tour, along with the museum's Ships, Clocks and Stars exhibition that was launched in 2014 to celebrate the tercentenary of the Queen Anne Longitude Act. This was the decree that offered anybody who could come up with a practicable solution to determining your longitude at sea, and offered a grand reward of £20,000, which in 1714 was a huge sum of money. If one equates it perhaps to, it is roughly the value of a second-rate ship of the line. And so what the Admiralty were offering, they were offering the price of one ship, hopefully, to save many. So the Ships, Clocks and Stars exhibition was first shown at Greenwich at the National Maritime Museum, and then it moved over to the USA and it travelled around a couple of venues there, and then to Australia before returning back to Greenwich. And during the packing and unpacking of K1 and other objects, it was noted, the condition is always checked at every stop, and it was noticed that there was a fair bit of very fine dust had gathered on the movement. The movement has been on open display for many years, and this is not particularly good for brass when you get fine dust settling on the brass surface. You get airborne moisture then attracted to the dust, and then you get chemical reactions taking place, and this results in tarnish and damage to the surface and condition of the watch. So it was noted down that the watch would need cleaning, and then that after this experience the watch movement would be returned to the case to add further protection for the next 33 or however many years before it is next taken apart. I cannot stress enough, what an exciting opportunity this is to get up close and see the internal workings of this watch. It is a once in a generation opportunity, and so it will be a good deal of time before the opportunity arises again. So while we have the cameras here today, we'll have a good look at the parts that make up this very special watch. Okay, I suppose what sets this mechanism aside from London-made watches, continental watches, is the sheer complexity of it. The lightness of these components is absolutely essential for optimum running. And so, yeah, this is really unlike, this is almost an alien technology. This is really new stuff, and quite exquisite. Here on the bench we have the key components that make up the remontoire mechanism. This coiled blued steel spring is the power source for the remontoire, and that's the spring that is rewound every 7.5 seconds. This incredible component here, this manages the lock and the release of the remontoire. So this piece, if you think about how much work this piece did on Captain Cook's second voyage, this piece would have operated around about 13 million times during that time. And it is just, as a piece of craftsmanship, it is just absolutely exquisite. Here you have a little pivoted claw, so you can just see here, this engages with a set of steel pins at the base of this unit. And when the steel pins push against it, then the detonant here is put in position to lock. So this is quite a remarkable component. Not only is it very delicate, fine, you can see the little counterweights here, it's got 3 acting pieces. So you have a roller here. The roller engages with the cam on this wheel. And when the roller falls into the flat on the cam, then the locking action can take place and the remontoire is stopped. The remontoire winds a steel spring. This is the steel spring, so this coiled blued steel spring round here directly applied to the contrate wheel, which then in turn drives the escapement. So it's this spring that's rewound every 7.5 seconds. And this piece here interacts down below with some pins that are just out of shot. And there's an incredibly tiny claw, and it's pivoted between this fork, and there's this wonderfully delicate spring here to keep it under tension. This here is essentially it's an open spring barrel. So this blued steel spring hooks onto the inner rim of this component here, and then this then sits over the top like so, and so that contains the spring there. Added feature of this, you'll notice that there are two armatures coming out either side here. So if I turn that upside down, you can see that they have a little downward protrusion when they're on the wheel there, and they engage with the crossings or the spokes on this remontoire wheel, on the contrate wheel. So it allows you to pre-tension the spring to give you different power outputs to the escapement until you get the optimum amplitude of the balance. What is it about Harrison's design that makes it so much better a timekeeper than your standard pocket watch? And the heart of it lies in the dimensions of the balance wheel. This is the balance wheel of Kendall's watch K1 that we see here. You can see the blued balance spring with a long tail, very few coils. You can even see that there's a little bit of there's a timing washer from a pocket watch has been glued to the balance in an effort to poise it at some point. So it is the dimension of the balance that makes it so much more resilient to the motion that was encountered on board the ship. The ticking of the watch is much faster than the standard, and the diameter, the dimensions of the balance are substantially different. So with the faster speed of ticking and with a large amplitude, this balance travels a much longer distance than a standard pocket watch would. And so it has a very high stored energy, and that gives it great stability when it is subjected to external physical forces. This design really is the beginning of the precision watch, and the majority of wristwatches produced in the 20th century had 18,000 trains, that is, that they beat 5 times per second. So here we have, if you like, the DNA to the modern mechanical wristwatch. Pocket watches of the period employed what's known as a verge escapement. So this is where the pallets resemble little flags coming out of the side of the staff. This is the staff here. And instead of having little flat steel squares, we've got brass settings, and just visible are the most exquisitely shaped pieces of diamond. They're actually shaped in section as a D shape. And like the verge escapement, the escape wheel, beautifully made escape wheel, made in steel, black polished all around, is in constant engagement with the pallet stones. For cutting diamonds, because of the crystalline structure of a diamond, it is very easy to polish flats onto a diamond along the crystalline structure. But to polish a curve onto diamond is an incredible achievement. And until recent times, it has been quite a mystery as to how Harrison and Kendall formed these diamond shapes. But it was achieved, and the curves at the back of the diamond act on the extremity of the oscillation of the balance, and the tooth tip rides up on that curve, and as it turns on the curve offers resistance and impels the balance back. So it helps with what we call isochronism. It helps to try and even out the time it takes to make a large arc of swing and a slightly smaller arc of swing. One of the shortcomings, if you like, of the balance assembly is that it's uncompensated for temperature. It's a steel balance, so when it gets hotter, it will expand. The diameter will increase, and the watch will run slower as a result of this. So Harrison, in his H4, applied the bimetallic strip. We have the bimetal from Kendall's timekeeper just here, and you can just see a pair of upright pins at the end, and those pins sit either side of the balance spring at the beginning of the spiral, and when the temperature changes, the bimetal curls depending whether the temperature is going up or down, and these pins move along the spring. And so what they do is they effectively shorten or lengthen the active part of the spring to compensate for that dimensional change in the balance rim. And this is how the temperature compensation is achieved in K1. We're looking at the third wheel of Kendall's watch here, and as you can see, the teeth are very unusually, they're internally cut. And this provides the clockwise rotation of the seconds. From a technical point of view, when you look at the shaping of these teeth and how they sort of come to the inside of what is normally referred to as a contrate wheel, imagine trying to get a cutter that can get that profile on the teeth without interfering with the spokes of the wheel. I just find this absolutely breathtaking watchmaking. It is exquisite, without a shadow of a doubt. So this is the balance bridge. You can see the two footings that slot into another decorated plate on the potence plate. And this serves to protect the balance wheel, as well as providing a pivot hole for the top of the balance staff. As you can see, the steel plate there encloses a small piece of diamond, and underneath the diamond is the ruby jewel hole. So if I turn that over, you can just see the setting, very much as you'll find in a high quality wristwatch of today. So you've got the chaton holding the ruby, two screws holding the whole assembly together and keeping the oil in one place, and importantly keeping it protected from the atmosphere as well. It is just beautiful. That piercing and that engraving, with interspersed in the engraving you've got little daffodils here. It's just utterly beautiful. So the primary reason for this being in the studio is that it has been suffering from tarnishing due to environmental conditions, and this is all too evident when you look here at the top plate, the potence plate. You can see Larcum Kendall's signature here, London, and this is ordinarily exposed. So you have these engraved plates that sit over there, and they of course have protected the brass, so you can see a very bright even finish here, but you can see quite a different texture and colour to where the plates have been exposed to the air. To a lesser extent over this section, because of course you have got the pierced balance bridge offering some protection, but particularly around the signature this is very dramatic. And looking at pictures from the last time that this was conserved in 1984, there is no evidence of any shadow on the watch plate. So clearly this has occurred in the last 33 years. So it really is going to inform us as to how we use the watch in displays in future. One thing that we are very lucky in this era is that we have a whole host of opportunities with audio visuals when it comes to museum display. And so we can use screens showing pictures of the movement. We can even have computer generated models of the watch shown on these displays. But based on this experience, I think that for the preservation of the watch for future generations, it's really going to have to be put into its case and left there to prevent this situation getting any worse. If I take the potence plate away, you look at the underside, it's quite clean. There's a little bit of oil marking. This is, but nothing serious. But then when you look at this plate, there is generally a diffuse sort of patina built up on here. But where the center wheel has been placed, you can actually see, you can see the profile of a silhouette, if you like, of the center wheel. So the center wheel sits in here, and you can see where it's been for many years, has been in this position, and has left a ghost image on the pillar plate. In terms of where we move from here, cleaning the plates back to remove this evidence, it really is not an option for us. This is now part of the history of the watch, and not something that we would alter. What I have done is very carefully cleaned it, and with a very light burnishing tried to remove any sort of proud crystalline surface to the metal, but certainly not going to the point where we would get the polish out and we would just obliterate this entirely. If I turn the plate over, you'll see some evidence of previous handling of the watch, and there are sort of fingerprint marks all around there. And this again, not something that we would want to remove, but we've made sure that it's stable. And it is part of the history of the watch. After all, there are very few people in the history of this timepiece that have been responsible for taking it apart and cleaning it. I'm not suggesting that they are, but you know, who knows? We could have the signature, the fingerprints of Thomas Earnshaw, for example. Were it not for the documentation laid down by people who have previously worked on timekeepers similar to this, I would be faced with a serious challenge. This document, which was initiated by Richard Good when he was repairing H5, which is currently in the Worshipful Company of Clockmakers collection, he details the lubricants that he chose to use on the watch. This sort of information is absolutely invaluable. If there's any sign of corrosion, it's really important to know what product it was that caused it, so that that product can be eliminated from future treatments. However, there is a slight problem, because some of the lubricants specified on this document are now long since out of production. And so very careful analysis of products available today have to be chosen, and importantly, I must document which ones I've used and where, so that when the next person takes this apart, they notice any problems as a result of the lubricants used, then we can move forward and use better products, hopefully. Here we're looking at K1 partially assembled, just to demonstrate the richness of the decoration on there. And if we place it next to his second timekeeper, we get a sense of the progression, really, of the marine timekeeper. By comparison, the level of decoration on K2 is substantially less. Further to that, the movement is much simpler. The remontoire has been removed entirely, so the watch's good timekeeping is reliant purely on the physics of the balance and the balance spring. The temperature compensation has changed slightly. We have a spiral bimetal in K2 that you can see just in here. and that is known or often referred to as a Chelsea bun because of its shape. So subtle differences, but simplification. K1 cost £500 to make, which is a huge sum of money for that period. And really the work that followed on, I mean, K1 proved that you could make a watch, you could then replicate it, and the replica would work just as well at sea and could be relied upon to navigate by. But then the big problem was simplifying the design so that it gave the functionality, the reliability, the stability, but at a much reduced cost. This has proven that a mechanical timekeeper could be relied on over a long voyage that crossed into very cold regions, tropical regions, and remained stable and dependable. And this really closed the chapter of the Harrison story and opened up a whole new story where other makers brought in together new technologies and simplified the precision watch so that it was practicable, affordable, and could be used not only to navigate by, but to survey the oceans, to place the hazards, because of course it's all very well having a watch that gets you from A to B, if you like, but if you don't know where the rocks, the reefs, the shallows are, you're still in big trouble. Thank you very much.